You're listening to KNX In Depth. Mike Simpson and Charles Feldman.
Ross Perot, very unlikely political rock star in 1992, the diminutive Texas billionaire, really small, didn't necessarily...
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, didn't necessarily look the part of a dashing American president, but he was fearless in talking the issues and staring down Bill Clinton and Bush as he did during the first presidential debate.
5.5 million people came together on their own and put me on the ballot. I was not put on the ballot by either of the two parties. I was not put on the ballot by any PAC money, by any foreign lobbyist money, by any special interest money. This is a movement that came from the people. This is the way the framers of the Constitution intended our government to be.
Perot, who passed away today at the age of 89, is the most successful third-party candidate for president to date. BJ Rudell, Associate Director of the Center for Political Leadership, Innovation, Service at Duke University. So when we say that, he definitely has secured his place in political history.
Yeah, you think about when he came around. First of all, thanks for having me today. He was somebody who really broke the mold. And you think about a two-party system that had been pretty much lockstep for about 150 years, with a few exceptions. Perot captured the imagination of more Americans than probably any third-party candidate before then and since.
But why? Was it his money, his personality, where he was from, his political views, what?
Yeah, I've always been struck by a sense of authenticity. I think there's a BS factor that a lot of voters either overtly detect in politicians or just subconsciously detect. And with Ross Perot, he had already walked the talk throughout his life. He was in his 60s when he ran. He didn't need the job. And I think what came across was just that clip that you played. There were other people, or he was able to convey to people, that this was more a service to the country than his own ego driving the process. Now, whether or not that was accurate, it played very well, and very few people, probably at that time or even today, could make that same case.
Something about tapping into voter frustration and running with it.
Exactly. I mean, you think about 1992, the Speaker of the House from Texas had resigned in disgrace a few years earlier, one or 2 years earlier. You had some scandals in Congress that lower approval rating, and Bush was increasingly unpopular. So there was a lot of discontent with politics as people saw it. Perot came around at a time that really capitalized on that discontent.
Is there an impact from his running back then to today?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question, because I think when somebody passes of his magnitude, and then we see a president today who ran and won, and I like to think that Donald Trump really was a third-party candidate, even though the history books will not show him that way. He actually took that mantle and ran with it and was more successful. But there were many similarities. Trump has loyalty oaths that he demanded people sign. Non-disclosure agreements. Perot had loyalty oaths that he demanded people sign. Trump's people were concerned that he was driving the process almost unilaterally, and people in the Perot camp, Ed Rollins and Hamilton Jordan, who works for him, felt that Perot wasn't listening to his advisors. So there is that continuity. At the same time, maybe Perot losing was the only way that Perot could go down in history as kind of a legendary third-party figure, that in fact winning can sometimes sully one's reputation, where losing can keep that reputation intact. And in many ways, Perot losing made him more of a larger-than-life mythic figure, whereas Trump winning, suddenly people see, for better or worse, who he really is.
The whole cowboy versus loose cannon thing probably helps with that too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he became a mythical figure just by being himself.
That's right. And the fact that, he lost in part because he wouldn't listen to people, and he was mythical in large part because he didn't listen to people. Those two, don't mesh well in politics, but they mesh well when it comes down to talking about him, in those glowing terms.
I thought what you said about President Trump interesting, that in effect, he's kind of a third-party candidate hiding behind the facade of the Republican Party. In that sense, do you think he learned a lesson from Perot that as a third-party candidate, he probably wasn't going to win, but call yourself a Republican and you got a chance?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Trump did, if memory serves, try to run or considered running as a Reform Party candidate for president in 2000. So certainly there was some connection there with Perot's legacy and Trump building on it. I don't profess to know what's in Trump's head in terms of how much he feels that he does learn from other people. But at the same time, I think voters could learn a great deal. This is a time to reflect on Ross Perot's life and what he did and didn't do in running for president, and the way he was able to pierce the middle, in a sense. He took views that he had on the left and views that he had on the right, and Americans on the left, right, and center embraced him, in spite of the fact that often they didn't agree with him. Now, maybe that was due to the fact that it was such a short campaign, there wasn't time to really criticize him. But you take someone like Trump, he's taken it in a different direction, which is pushing as hard as possible in one direction. And I think that's really the difference between the two men in a nutshell, is Perot was himself, and Trump has transformed immensely over the last 10 years, from Democrat to Republican to as hardcore Republican as anyone who's been president.
BJ Rudell, Associate Director, Center for Political Leadership, Innovation, Service at Duke.